Welcome to this episode of the Aquarist Edge, a podcast for home aquarists just like you. Learn more about how to keep a thriving aquarium and discover ideas and tips to give your aquarium the edge. And now, over to our host, Arthur Preston.
You've heard the term a million times, from YouTube videos, from podcast hosts, perhaps from well-meaning aquarist friends. And that term is the nitrogen cycle. Many of us think we know what that is. It's ammonia turning into nitrite, then into nitrate, and then we do water changes. But if that's all you know, then you're only scratching the surface. And so in today's episode of the Aquarist Edge, I want to go into a bit more detail. I want to dig a bit deeper into what this nitrogen cycle actually is and why it's so important that we understand it to have healthy, functional tanks. We're going to talk about biochemistry, microbial ecology. We're going to talk about nitrification bottlenecks. We're going to talk about heterotrophic versus autotrophic dynamics. And if that sounds a little bit too scientific, stick around because it's going to be explained in a way that even if you have no science background, you'll be able to understand. We're going to talk about the way that our tanks fail to mimic or in fact do mimic natural ecosystems. We're going to uncover why managing the cycle poorly can wipe out a tank, why cycled doesn't always mean stable, and how to go way beyond the ammonia, nitrite, nitrate basics. So let's get into it, and perhaps at the end of this episode, you'll be a little more aware of what this thing called the nitrogen cycle actually is. So grab a coffee, settle in, and let's get stuck in. Well, let's perhaps start with the very basics. What really is the nitrogen cycle? In broad ecological terms, it's the process by which nitrogen is converted into multiple chemical forms as it circulates among the atmosphere, terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems. In your aquarium, this cycle is an engineered microcosm of that same global process. And here's the kicker. Nitrogen makes up 78% of our atmosphere, but the vast majority of organisms can't use it in its atmospheric form. That's N2 gas. That's where fixation, mineralization, nitrification, assimilation, and denitrification come into play. Now, in an aquarium, we deal primarily with the following: ammonification, nitrification, assimilation, and sometimes, if you've got the right conditions, denitrification. And so here's what usually happens. The fish will excrete ammonia, either directly through the gills or in their waste. Uneaten food and decaying organic matter also release ammonia. And this ammonia is highly toxic, especially in its unionized form, and must be converted. And this is where nitrifying bacteria come into play. Nitrosomonas species of bacteria convert ammonia into nitrite. Nitrospira, or what was previously believed to be Nitrobacter bacteria, convert nitrite into nitrate. And here's where it gets scientific and somewhat fascinating. In 2006, a landmark study revealed that Nitrospira are far more important in freshwater systems than previously thought. For decades, we assumed that Nitrobacter was the key nitrite oxidizer, but molecular analysis showed Nitrospira dominate in most aquarium systems. So, if your test kit says nitrite is gone, think Nitrospira. What are these bacteria, these fancy long scientific words? What are they actually? Oh, maybe you could think of them as bugs. By bugs I would mean chemoautotrophic bacteria. These are the quiet custodians of your aquarium's health, and their biology is not simple. For instance, nitrifying bacteria are slow growing, they're sensitive to environmental changes, and they're attached growth specialists. In other words, they prefer biofilms and surfaces over a life of being free floating. They're really not just floating around your water column. They live in your filter media, gravel, plant roots, driftwood surfaces, and so on. But here's the catch. These bacteria don't just appear magically. The myth that they just show up isn't accurate. They're usually seeded via substrate, live rock, used filter media, or bacterial additives. But not all additives are created equal. Many of the common over-the-counter cycling bacteria products contain heterotrophic bacteria. Now, these are great for breaking down organics, but not the nitrifiers we need. Look for species-labeled additives with strains such as Nitrosomonas europea and Nitrospira spp. But here's something even more advanced aquarists often overlook, and that's oxygen gradients. Nitrification is aerobic. Now, that simply means oxygen must be present. But in deep substrate layers or clogged filter zones, oxygen drops. And that fact changes everything. So let's walk through what happens when things go sideways. So here's some common failures. The tank is cycled, but the biofilter is starved of ammonia due to overcleaning or a lack of livestock. You might overfeed, causing an ammonia spike beyond what the bacteria can handle. Or you've done a deep clean of your filter media in tap water repeatedly, and that chlorine has wiped out the majority of your colony. And there are certain medications that can nuke your beneficial bacteria. And so suddenly you're seeing your ammonia creeping up, you're seeing fish flashing or gasping or lying listless at the bottom of the aquarium. You're seeing nitrite spikes, which can impair oxygen transported fish. And nitrates, if you're not removing it via water changes, plants or anaerobic processes, it climbs. Slowly, but surely. So here's a truth bomb for you. A stable nitrogen cycle isn't just about cycling the tank. It's about maintaining a balance every single day. So let's compare. How does this play out in nature? In natural aquatic ecosystems, as lakes, rivers, and wetlands, the nitrogen cycle is part of a dynamic equilibrium with hundreds of feedback mechanisms. Leaf litter breaks down, and that fuels heterotrophic bacteria. Plants and algae absorb nitrates and ammonium directly. Anaerobic sediment zones host denitrifying bacteria, converting nitrate into nitrogen gas, and that gas escapes into the atmosphere and the nitrogen is gone. But in your tank, nitrate builds up, and it's mostly removed by water changes unless you start mimicking nature. And how would you do that? Well, you could start with a deep substrate or reverse flow undergravel filters. You could use planted tanks with fast growers such as hygrophila or hornwort, or specialized denitrifying reactors that use carbon. Now, these approaches don't just make the tank look natural, they activate processes such as assimilatory nitrate reduction and denitrification, which occur in nature every single day. Let's go a bit deeper into nitrogen management for the advanced aquarist. Let's talk about something called the CN ratio, that is, the carbon to nitrogen ratio. Microbes need a balance of carbon to nitrogen. By adding carbon sources such as vodka, vinegar, or various commercial blends, you can encourage microbial populations that consume nitrate. But here's a caution, it must be done with extreme care. Overdosing carbon can lead to bacterial blooms, oxygen crashes, and livestock death. And by the way, I'm not sure any of us want to be chucking vodka into our aquariums. Secondly, we could choose media with a very high surface area and the right pore size to support both nitrifiers and denitrifiers. We could use live plants. Now, not all plants are equal. Fast-growing stem plants such as Ludwigia, Limnifera, and floating plants like Sulfinia and duckweed suck up nitrates effectively. Now, if you combine this with a little bit of fertilization to drive plants to prioritize nitrogen uptake, you can certainly help a great deal with nitrogen management in your tank. You can also use a soil-based or a wall-state tank. These setups rely on a full soil substrate and minimal filtration. The soil will act as a nutrient sink, with anaerobic pockets supporting denitrification. Diana Wallstead herself noted that her tanks rarely require water changes because of this internal nitrogen balance. You can also use an algae or an algal turf scrubber and a moss wall. Even freshwater algae, when harnessed correctly, can act as a nitrate sponge. Algal turf scrubbers, while more common in reef tanks, are gaining popularity amongst high-tech freshwater keepers as well. Let's troubleshoot two common pain points. The first one is that your ammonia won't drop. And so you've got to ask yourself a few questions here. Is your pH too low? Nitrifying bacteria stall below 6.5. Are you using chlorinated water? Now, even a trace chlorine can kill off colonies of bacteria. Did you overuse a medication or a UV sterilizer? And is your filter media undersized or not well oxygenated? So fixing this would include things like increasing surface agitation to boost oxygen, to stop cleaning the filter media in tap water, to use bacterial starter cultures with the right strain. Another issue people face is that the nitrite spikes long after cycling. You must check your water flow path. Is the water perhaps bypassing the biomedia? You check for overcleaning or bacterial die-off. and consider that Nitrospira take longer to establish than Nitrosomonas. And as we begin to close this episode of having dug a bit deeper into the nitrogen cycle, I hope your head is buzzing in the best way possible. Let's just do a quick recap on all the scientific jargon and the bits and pieces we've shared today. The nitrogen cycle is a complex, dynamic interplay of biology and chemistry, and it is foundational to any successful tank. But being cycled is not a finish line. It's a constant process. Nature has tools we can borrow: deep substrates, denitrifying bacteria, and plant-assisted filtration. We need to know that mismanaging nitrogen leads to stress, disease, and death, but understanding it gives you control. So, folks, I trust that you have learned something from this episode. I hope that it has been helpful to you, that perhaps it has spurred you on to go and learn more, perhaps look up some of these long scientific jargon words that I've used today, and that you'll take this knowledge and enhance your aquarium keeping through it. So folks, if this episode has been helpful to you, please leave a review on your favorite podcast app. If you happen to be listening to us on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It always helps to bring these podcasts in front of newer audiences. So, as always, thank you again for giving of your time to listen to this podcast. I hope it has been helpful. And as always, keep learning, keep discovering, and keep enjoying this amazing hobby. Until next time, bye for now.
That's it for this episode of the Aquarist Edge. Please consider subscribing to this podcast so that you don't miss further episodes. We would love it if you would also rate and review the podcast, as this helps make it visible to others. Until next time, keep learning and discovering, and keep finding your Aquarist Edge in this captivating and fascinating hobby.